Over the 10 years I've been making YouTube content, I've often begun videos by saying something along the lines of, "This is one of the most disturbing mysteries I've ever covered." I suppose the longer you stare into the abyss of the internet, the darker the things you end up finding. What can I say? It's an endless black hole of debauchery. But today's subject genuinely might be the most disturbing thing I have ever encountered online. In my opinion, it belongs to a tier of horror most people never come across, and frankly, never should. This upload isn't a treasure map to the material I'll be discussing. The raw footage is definitely not something you should ever go searching for. Anything I do show here will be heavily cropped or blurred, though fair warning, just hearing about the details may not be for the faint of heart. Okay, if you're still with me after that rather lengthy disclaimer, let's dive in. Several months ago, I stumbled upon this Vice article by Ben Ditto, titled, "A Vietnamese Murder Has Given the World Its First Real Snuff Movie." It detailed the story of 3 video clips, which surfaced on the shock site Watch People Die in late July 2025, a collection known as The Vietnamese Butcher. The most shared video in that collection, tentatively called The Execution, is as simple as it is horrifying. A top-down shot of a man lying on a tarp spread across a tiled bathroom floor, pleasuring himself. Beneath his neck is a wooden chopping block. The muffled sound of dogs and vehicles can be heard in the distance, suggesting it was filmed in the middle of civilization. But there's nothing civilized about what happens next. When the man says he's about to finish, a second figure standing just off screen steps into view, raises a meat cleaver, and, in several brutal blows, severs his head. The grisly scene is all caught head-on in close-up detail. Blood sprays across the room. The victim's body twitches and goes limp. The executioner then immediately gets to work, pulling the man's head out of view and slicing apart his body with a level of precision that suggested this wasn't his first rodeo. While breathing heavily, he makes an incision from the neck straight down to the pubic bone, splitting the cut sideways. The clip went viral almost immediately, mainly because of the impact it had on those who viewed it. Though most WPD users were well acquainted with footage of death and depravity, this video felt different. More coordinated, more professionally set up. The room had been properly lit. The framing was intimate, and as would later be revealed, the money shot had been filmed by multiple cameras set up around the room. The next video in the collection, filmed immediately after the execution, has since been labelled The Butchering, and shows the victim's body being methodically dismembered. Limbs separated and arranged, organs washed in a sink, human meat placed in pots and on plates using chopsticks, certain body parts being inserted into the victim's mouth. But of the 3 videos that appeared in July, perhaps the most revealing is the first clip, the rehearsal. It shows the victim in a different location, an office setting, placing his head on a chopping block, while a figure wearing what looks like Adidas sportswear and a Guy Fawkes mask brings his cleaver down to the man's neck, as if illustrating how he plans to deliver the fatal blow. Towards the end of the clip, the kneeling man asks for the cameras to be turned off. The masked soon-to-be killer comforts his soon-to-be victim. Both men stand up, and the clip ends. The implication of these 2 other videos was clear. That the victim wasn't only aware he was being filmed, but had willingly allowed himself to be killed for the purposes of cannibalization. As the morbidly curious would soon discover, the 3 Vietnamese Butcher videos were only the tip of the iceberg. They were part of a pack consisting of 11 recordings and 98 photographs, which was being advertised for sale on Telegram, an encrypted app often used by criminals due to how difficult it is to trace exchanges. Limited access to this pack reportedly cost around $100 US, while full access set you back around $600. The pack had apparently been circulating on the black market since February, 5 months before parts of it were uploaded to WPD. Not all of it has surfaced yet, but what has is enough to turn the stomach of even the most experienced gore hunter. In one series of since leaked images, the victim's heart, kidneys, and other organs were shown cooked in a herbal stew with red dates and goji berries. Other parts were seemingly turned into a curry dish. In another set of images, the executioner can be seen posing in a mirror, holding the victim's freshly severed head. Some have claimed to have seen a video in which the killer boils that head in a pot, though if it exists, it hasn't turned up on the surface web yet. Now, countless death clips have circulated online over the years, but the Vietnamese Butcher hit the internet like a freight train, with Vice labeling the execution segment the first verified snuff video. As per their article, snuff is defined as a murder filmed for commercial distribution. They're not just videos of real killings like 3 Guys 1 Hammer. They're not a compilation of repurposed gore clips. They have to have been produced specifically to turn a profit. Not for pleasure, not to inspire fear, but for monetary gain. Now we can sit here and debate that definition till the cows come home, but what's important is that according to criminologists, no murder movies, on the internet or otherwise, have ever been produced for the primary purpose of turning a profit. Until now, perhaps. After reading the Vice write-up, I figured this mystery made for a good segment in one of my disturbing things I found on the internet videos. However, I couldn't find any other English language outlets covering the story. I waited for more information to come out, but it just never did, and slowly the case faded from my mind. That is, until last week, when I was contacted by one of my viewers. This individual, who I'll call X, suggested that I look into this mystery again, as there had recently been some huge developments. X directed me to a 106-page dossier, which had been created by the OSINT and Cyber Investigation Vietnam community over on Facebook. Operating in the shadows using burner accounts for their own safety, this group had been conducting their own investigation into the footage, collecting open source evidence in an effort to name the victim and unmask the killer. This is the story of their investigation. OSINT, as I'll now refer to the Facebook group as, began by doing a cursory bit of Googling to see how much information about the Vietnamese Butcher was already available. Of course, not much came up. Despite the victim's face being clearly visible, his family, if he had any, hadn't stepped forward to identify him, and there was no indication that the police were looking into the matter. However, because the circumstances of the mystery were so rare, OSINT did have a fairly good idea of where to begin their investigation. Up until that point, there had only been 2 other known cases where one human being had allowed themselves to be consumed by another. Both occurred in Germany. The first was the infamous case of Armin Meiwes, who ate willing volunteer, Bernd Brandes, and the other was of policeman Detlef Gunzel, who killed Polish businessman Wojciech Stepniewicz. Though no hard evidence was found that Gunzel ate parts of Stepniewicz, it's strongly suspected that he did based on their chat history. You see, in both instances, the participants had met through online cannibal forums, Cannibal Cafe and Zambian Meat respectively, and it stood to reason that the same was true of the men in the Vietnamese Butcher. Given that both the victim and the mass perpetrator spoke with authentic Vietnamese accents, the unofficial title of the content appeared to be accurate, and OSINT sleuths began trawling through Vietnamese online groups dedicated to so-called long pork, and it didn't take them long to identify the victim, a 36-year-old man called Nguyen Xuan Dat. Little is known about who Dat was as a person, as he lived an incredibly private life and had few known friends, at least in the real world. Online, however, he moved in very lively and very illicit circles. Since around 2019, Dat had been an active user of Motherless, an explicit file-sharing platform only accessible by VPN that catered to the most hardcore, deviant tastes. On that site, and various other extreme forums, he used variations of the handle, Dat Beheading. His posts, both on Facebook and those more niche sites, were fixated on decapitation and cannibalism. Not of other people, mind you, but of himself. In one leaked message, purported to have been written by Dat, he reasoned that, quote, "Not only am I ugly, but I'm also full of diseases. I can't afford to live freely like normal folks. I've depended on my parents my whole life. What else could I do? I truly am a prisoner of my own fate." Seemingly fed up with his lot in life, Dat instead chose to withdraw from society and dedicate the rest of his existence to his deepest, darkest desire. Online, he spoke about his so-called final fantasy, to be slain at the peak of ecstasy by a female executioner, and then eaten afterwards. It was a subject that wasn't out of place in the online spaces he frequented. On one forum dedicated to Japanese manga, for example, an Edo Guro story called Applicant for Death was translated into Vietnamese at the, quote, request of Mr. Dat beheading. The narrative revolves around a man who, while in bed with two women, has his head lopped off with a katana. The head then continues to describe the unbelievable sensation. To those digging through Dat's post history, this manga looked less like a piece of entertainment he wanted to consume, and more like a blueprint he wanted to follow. For years, he rigorously tried to find someone who could make his dream a reality, and slowly amassed a virtual group of friends who displayed similarly abnormal psychological tendencies. Evidently though, his attempt to find a female executioner was unsuccessful. Later, OSINT members managed to track down an account on a gay forum believed to belong to Dat. In one post, he shared his mobile number. They were then able to trace that number back to a Zalo account, which listed Dat's birth date as March 10th, 1989. Cross-referencing details, netizens were able to find a man with Dat's name and date of birth listed in a Tai Bin village registry. When two users called the village head directly, he confirmed that there was a man by that name who left the village after his father passed. Dat's mother, his only known living relative, who reportedly struggles with mental health issues, lost contact with her son years prior, hence why nobody came forward to identify him when the videos surfaced. Meanwhile, other users contacted the few friends listed on Dat's Facebook profile, hoping that somebody would respond with a lead. One contact, who used the alias Philae, replied. Philae was a fellow decapitation fantasist. They claimed to have met Dat once, briefly, and said that he worked as a fishmonger at Phuong Hoang Market in Hanoi. Crucially though, Philae also stated that they knew Dat's killer. It was a man that they had both interacted with on various forums. A man who was part of their bizarre online community. A man by the name of Chung. According to Philae and others, Dat had been in contact with Chung for quite some time, but had become frustrated with him as he wouldn't commit to a firm execution date. Eventually, however, Chung did agree to kill Dat at a specific time and place. As shown in a screenshot provided by Philae, after the execution, Dat's account sent out a private message to one of his contacts. A message which simply read, Dat has been beheaded. It seems that Chung didn't only have access to Dat's social media accounts, but was actively using them to stay in contact with his inner circle of death enthusiasts, perhaps in an attempt to fish for further victims. Searching for confirmation about Chung's involvement, OSINT investigators continued to message Dat's friends, including those he made on a homosexual group called Likes Beheading. One member, going by the name Hoa Choi, responded, and even claimed to be the killer in the videos. His confession was brief, and following it, Hoa Choi stopped responding. Following this, exchanges between Hoa Choi and other people, including Dat, were found, in which he offered his murder services. In the minds of OSINT members, one of three things had to be true. That Hoa Choi was just role-playing and inserting himself into the case for a thrill. That Hoa Choi was an alias used by the real executioner, Chung. Or, more concerningly, that Hoa Choi was another of Chung's victims, whose account he had access to. After combing through Dat's Facebook history, forum posts and communications, the community put together a timeline. And it looked like this. January 25th, 2025. On Facebook, Dat posted a worrying status update, which simply read, 3 hours left until the execution. On that same day, his various other forum accounts recorded their last ever activity. This is broadly considered to be the day that the Vietnamese Butcher was filmed, and Dat's life came to an end. February 25th, 2025. A message went out from Dat's account to one of his contacts, explaining that Dat was dead. It's believed that this message was actually sent by his executioner, Chung. That same month, the Vietnamese Butcher videos and photos went up for sale on the black market. June 10th, 2025, Dat's Facebook account posted its final ever status update, which read, "From today, I'm logging off from this account for good." This was further evidence that his killer had been maintaining his account. Following that final message, Dat's page remained online. When the Vietnamese Butcher videos surfaced on WPD in July, and his page began to receive a lot of traffic, the account was manually terminated. Proving that timeline definitively would require access to the kind of tools only law enforcement possess, but for those following the breadcrumbs, it was a disturbingly coherent story. So, those investigating the mystery had found their victim, and all but confirmed the time and date of his death. But the most pressing question still remained unanswered. Who was the masked man in the footage? The one they knew as Chung. Though some naively thought he was innocent of any wrongdoing because Dat willingly offered up his life, in no country in the world is it lawful to kill someone just because they give their consent. Euthanasia is an obvious exception, but that's for patients who meet specific criteria. It's carried out by licensed healthcare professionals under detailed legal and medical safeguards, and any killings outside of those rules is still considered homicide. Whoever Chung was, he was 100% guilty of murder. Who knows how many other times this cleaver-wielding lunatic had preyed on vulnerable victims to fulfill his own twisted murder fantasies. Who knows when he might do the same again. It was imperative that they track this man down and unmask him, and thankfully, they had something to work with. As mentioned, in one photo, Chung appeared in a mirror holding Dat's head, and enough of his features were visible to tease out details. For example, he had a stocky build, a receding or balding hairline, a scar over one eyebrow, monolid eyes, a green mask that some speculated might be of a military type, and most importantly, he had a striking birthmark pattern on his arm and armpit, and a tattoo reading, "That day, 13-9. Hunting for more clues, netizens began examining Chung's surroundings. In the butchering video, he moved through what looked like a small kitchen with blue and white patterned floor tiles, red baseboards, a green door, red wall tiles around the counter, and a white countertop. At one point, a Levy water bottle was visible on a table, as was a yellow bottle of Chinese brown washing up liquid near the sink. Some users said that the decor, utensils, and cleaning products looked exactly like those seen and sold in Vietnam's northern border provinces, which helped to narrow down the search. But frustratingly, that's where OSINT hit a dead end. By late August, the case was burning out, and for months, no new developments were announced. It seemed like the Vietnamese Butcher was destined to join the countless other internet mysteries that would forever remain unsolved. But then, just last month, the story exploded again. In the third week of November 2025, an anonymous Facebook user, who we'll refer to as the Whistleblower, or WB, stepped forward and claimed to have been in direct contact with both Dat and the executioner. This person shared fresh screenshots of their final correspondence from Dat, which they received on January 25th, 2025. In a message sent at 2:40 PM, Dat told WB that the execution would occur in about 3 hours, putting his time of death somewhere around 5:30 to 6 PM. Dat also mentioned having shared the whistleblower's details with the executioner, suggesting WB was considering offering themselves up to be butchered. Since then, WB had clearly changed their mind. Instead of stepping into the executioner's path, they were stepping forward to help advance the investigation, saying that they wanted Dat's killer brought to justice, even if he consented to his fate. Crucially, WB released their chat history with the supposed killer, a man whose name on Facebook was Cam Than Chung. In those messages, Chung said that, quote, "Dat's bones have already become fertilizer." He invited the whistleblower to discuss his upcoming beheading in person and asked to meet at a specific address, a street in Heilong Town, Lang Son province. The pin seemed to be just outside a government tax department. For the first time, the hunt for Chung had something solid, a full name and a physical location. Enter a YouTube channel called K Tomo, The Curious One. This creator had been covering the case for some time, using 3D reconstructions of the crime scene. Now, with the name and address, he started cross-referencing everything that the community had found with public social media profiles, and stated that he had identified the killer. However, before he could reveal anything specific, he presumably received some form of death threat, and posted, "The forces behind this are too powerful enough to swallow our entire team, so the investigation will end here." He also said that if anything happened to him, all of the information he had found would become public. Along with that message, he shared a partial image of the suspect's face and a blurred screenshot of one of his usernames, and it didn't take long for OSINT members to unblur that name. Tanchung 11111. From that point, the web of connections began to form. The handle Tanchung 51s and similar variants appeared across multiple platforms: anonymous forums, Instagram, TikTok. Crucially, many of them were linked with a Twitter account called Duan Sang LS, which in turn linked back to a Facebook account, one belonging to Duan Van Sang, a seemingly normal, married father of two in his late 50s who lived in Langsong, close to the Chinese border. He was a retired deputy head of a market management department, or MMD team, as well as the head of Langsong City's Duan family, a large clan with thousands of members. Sang's photo showed a man who lived a comfortable lifestyle. He held a senior bureaucratic role, enjoyed a large amount of status within his community, and had strong ties to the government, not only through his own work, but also through his wife and sons. Could he really be the Chung that people were searching for? Well, as it would turn out, Sang's eldest son was named Thanchung, and that same son's birthday just so happened to be the 13th of September. That day, 13-9. It was a coincidence that was hard to ignore, as were the clothes that his son had been pictured wearing, which matched perfectly with the clothes worn by the masked figure in the rehearsal video. Though some think that this points towards Sang's son being involved in the production, the masked individual clearly has a receding hairline and a body type that more closely matches suspect Sang. Perhaps he borrowed his son's sportswear. Perhaps they owned a matching pair. Either way, private messages sent by the Kam Thanchung profile contained photos which strongly suggested the person operating the account was indeed Sang, and that he was simply using his own child's name online as a cover. So though some think that Sang may not have been working alone, there's zero evidence at this point that his son was involved in any way. People began poring over Sang's old photos, including ones from a second, largely abandoned Facebook account that he hadn't locked down in time, and started comparing images side by side, and what they found was chilling. Sang had a circular birthmark on his shin, which matched a mark visible on the executioner's leg. A prominent birthmark on his right bicep and armpit area was also very similar to the one seen in the butcher's photos. Scars and marks on Sang's face lined up with those seen on the killer, as did the tattoo placement, and his hairline and facial structure were eerily similar. This image, showing the outside of Sang's house, also contains another hidden detail: a pair of flip-flops identical to the ones worn by the killer in the execution clip. Digging deeper, people soon found a TikTok video Sang had filmed at an MMD building known as Market Management Team No. 3. The background of the office he filmed in was identical to that seen in the rehearsal video, down to the same plastic plants, blue fan blades, and misaligned cabinets. Others dug up a news article which included a photo taken at the department's old Team No. 4 location, where Sang was second in command. In the image, Sang can be seen inspecting some goods in front of what looked like the same kitchen seen in the butchering video, with the same green doors, red tile trim, blue floor tiles, red kitchen wall tiles, and white countertop. The location of the execution video couldn't be determined at the time, as it was filmed in a generic bathroom, though it doesn't make sense that the killer would transport a dead body to a different location for butchering. Using common sense, the most likely place for the execution to have taken place is the same building as where the butchering was conducted. Images have since leaked from inside Team Number 4's bathroom, now known as the most miserable toilet in the world. Looks familiar, right? Sang retired from his position in 2025, but was still working for the MMD when Dat was killed. But why would a government employee commit a crime inside his own workplace? Doesn't that strike you as a risky decision? Well, there's actually a grim logic to his choice of venue. The assumed execution date, January 25th, was the beginning of the Tet holiday, when the Vietnamese ring in the Lunar New Year. On that day, government offices would have been deserted. On top of that, a market management department office would have a kitchen, cooking gear, and an incinerator for destroying confiscated goods. Sang supposedly volunteered to remain at the office for 5 days during that Lunar New Year period, while all the other officers and employees took a break. As the online dragnet tightened, Sang found himself at the center of a digital storm. For months, he had secretly been a member of online communities discussing the case, including the OSINT Facebook group, monitoring the investigation, reading the threads, commenting on the updates, no doubt feeling a thrill at being the hidden villain in a story the whole country was whispering about. He had even reacted with laughing emojis when users expressed their frustration at the investigation's dwindling progress. After being exposed, however, he began leaving his own series of bizarre and agitated posts on the group's timeline, saying things like, "I am the executioner. Who can catch me? Let me tell you straight, you are the real executioners, because you want people to die so that you can celebrate. Isn't that right? I've lived 60 years in this world. I'm no longer afraid of death. Anyone who wants to meet me is invited to my house. Who exposed me? Show yourself." To some, this looked like the guilty flailing of a man suddenly realizing the internet had found him out. To others, it was the panicked confusion of someone being falsely accused on a massive scale. Perhaps out of loyalty, Sang Sung came to his defense in an equally strange way, posting and later deleting a photo of his lunch with the caption, "Come on, it's just a few pieces of human meat." Likely just a taunting bit of dark humor, but I'm gonna censor that image anyway just in case. At this juncture, the evidence was compelling, and digital forensics added more layers. Some users attempted to reset the passwords for 2 of Sang's email addresses, which both routed two-factor authentication through the same Oppo Reno 12 5G device. Password reset attempts for an email linked to Dat's phone number also pinged from that same device, another entry into OSINT's growing list of coincidences. Looking at the digital trail associated with Sang's online handles, a disturbing profile emerged. The man behind those accounts appeared to have started out using social media to seek casual flings and flirtations on gay forums, then, over the course of 2 decades, gradually adopted a master persona, someone who wants to dominate, humiliate, and torture his partners. Eventually, he developed an obsession with cutting and cannibalism. In 2022, Sang uploaded photos of a dismembered body to a forum, saying he wanted to toughen up the other members. The images were later removed, and where he sourced them from remains unclear. Screenshots also show him trying to order sliced-off pieces of male anatomy, let's say, from suppliers in southern Vietnam, parts believed to have come from gender affirmation surgeries, or from men willing to sell body parts for money. In the eyes of the Vietnamese online community, the stack of coincidences against Sang, the body marks, the tattoo, the kitchen, the office, devices, addresses, handles, the post history, was all enough to label him the prime suspect. Now they just needed the authorities to actually investigate and confirm their suspicion through the use of forensics, both physical and digital. Yet despite being made aware of the Vietnamese Butcher videos, for months the authorities sat on their hands. Comments made on the Langsong's police page asking them to take action were seemingly deleted. Some called this laziness on the police's part. Others thought they were trying to protect Vietnam's safe image, and others still labelled them corrupt. Given Sang's status and ties to the party, many feared that he may have been using his influence to shut down the investigation, and given the attention he was now receiving, might start to target individual members of the OSINT group. As a safety precaution, the majority of members continued their investigation anonymously. After spending months compiling digital breadcrumbs and spreading awareness, the then 20,000-strong OSINT community created the 106-page document detailing their findings, going so far as to translate it into English for maximum reach. The PDF went viral. In a matter of days, the Facebook group exploded in size, and their evidence became too compelling to ignore. On November 28, 2025, it was quietly announced that Sang had been arrested, and that the suspected crime scene had been sealed off for forensic testing. According to a translation of the police report, they found 3 teeth suspected to be human under the kitchen sink, as well as numerous bone fragments located in the septic tank of the restroom, in the drainage cavity in the kitchen, and in the water channel behind the kitchen. Forensic tests are still ongoing. The report also states that they conducted a search of Sang's home. This resulted in the discovery and seizure of 2 jackets matching what the perpetrator was seen wearing in the rehearsal video, as well as a space heater matching one seen in the execution video. Investigators also seized a mobile phone believed to have belonged to Dat, which was being used by Sang's elder sister. When questioned, she said that Sang had given her the phone to use. Following his arrest, Sang admitted to being behind the Vietnamese Butcher. His official confession, as it currently stands, reads as follows. Around 2020, Sang became acquainted with Dat through social media. After talking for a period of time, Dat confided in Sang that he was participating in a group operating through a website called Motherless. Dat repeatedly invited Sang to join this group. At first, Sang found it barbaric and didn't dare join or participate. However, Sang continued to learn and research various types of sexual violence, gay practices, and eventually joined. Dat continued telling Sang about his wish to be slain in a specific manner. At one point, Dat told Sang that he was willing to pay 10 million dong, around $380, to rent a location where this scenario could be carried out. By July 2024, Sang agreed, and expressed a desire to perform the slaying as Dat wished. On the 25th of January 2025, Sang summoned Dat to the Market Management Building. When Dat arrived, he brought 2 cleavers for Sang to use. At around dusk, Sang killed Dat exactly as shown in the video clips circulated online. After killing Dat, Sang used a knife to cut the victim's body into multiple sections, separating bones, flesh, and internal organs. He placed the parts into a pot and boiled them, with the stated purpose of preventing rapid decomposition and odor. He then smashed the bones and placed both bone and flesh into approximately 10 plastic bags, a small portion of which was reportedly fed to dogs. He disposed of the remains at various locations, mainly by throwing them into public trash bins. As for the 2 cleavers used as the weapons, on the 27th of January, while travelling home from work, Sang disposed of them by placing them into the container of a handcart parked along the roadside. Some people take umbrage with how Sang's confession is presented, saying that he's spinning the situation so that he sounds like the victim, that he was effectively hypnotized or manipulated by Dat into following his instructions, when there's plenty of evidence that he had been digging around in depraved online rabbit holes for decades, has a post-history in which he talks about wanting to kill and eat people, and just 2 weeks after killing Dat, was actively trying to recruit the whistleblower as his next victim. Obviously, this is a very recent case, and information is still coming out as we speak. Still, thanks in large part to the work of the OSINT Facebook group, Duan Sang will stand trial for Dat's slaying, and, depending on how things proceed, could face the death penalty. But this may not be the end of the story. Now with more information to work with, it's clear that this case doesn't meet Vice's definition of snuff, as Sang had filmed the videos primarily to fulfill his own twisted desires. I think it's safe to say that profit came secondary to that. But what if Sang wasn't actually the one selling the content? As mentioned, before surfacing on shock sites, the Vietnamese Butcher was being distributed by unknown Chinese-speaking individuals through encrypted messaging apps. At present, we don't know if that was Sang People he had shared the content with online? Or, more worryingly, dark web associates who had helped him produce his home movies? This has led many to come up with a dark theory. That Sang wasn't some lone wolf, but part of a broader black market of snuff traders operating throughout East and Southeast Asia. Other similar cases have already started to surface on the Chinese platform Baidu Taiba, with Anon selling real footage of chopped up Asian men. As uncovered by Vice in their article, one message from a Chinese distributor selling his wares read,
"Price is 89 yuan to join the regular group, 198 to join the large group. It's a stable group that's been around for 4 or 5 years. Tens of thousands of users, dumping corpses, body dismembering, executions, etc. Necrophilia is in the Ice Love group. If you just want pure clean bodies, that's called forensics."
And that's perhaps the most disturbing part of this entire saga. That the Vietnamese Butcher could just be one small piece of a giant puzzle. That there are potentially many more videos just like it being bought and sold by nefarious individuals that have yet to be leaked. People who kill others because they ask for it, or, in some cases, just because they can get away with it. People who sell human organs as exotic meat. People who sell them for transplant. There's certainly a market for it. Perhaps time will tell whether that's true or not. What is certain is that this particular case has rocked Vietnam to the core, and while official channels remain pretty quiet, the only thing ordinary people can do is keep the story alive so that it isn't buried under the next wave of headlines. Again, I implore you all not to go searching for any of the media discussed in this video. It's psychologically damaging, and depending on where you live, could be considered illegal to view. All credit for this investigation goes to the thousands of collaborators over on the OSINT Facebook page and elsewhere, as well as the work done by YouTuber The Curious One. I'd like to personally thank my anonymous viewer, X, for contacting me about this case, and keeping me updated as it developed. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to my supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters. Holly Lyons, Gina Valera, Colin Monsma, Connor Louthan, Hamish, Alana Pons, Azrael Warakai, Peter Lulgjuraj, TNS Mum, Asia Mina, George Lopez, Farewelltattoosjaxfl, Yokai, Terry Ford, Mistyblue Longie, Aðalsteinn Traustason, John Stewart Muller, Blaze420, and Hamish K. Thank you guys so much for your continued support.